Okay, we'll make a start. I say we've got a good few more registered than are here at the moment, but hopefully they'll jump on the call. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the October, what is now the Power Hour. We rebranded it from Business Support Hour. We felt it sounded a little bit more up to date and snazzy. So there we are. We're going to jump across to the presentation in about sort of 5 or 10 minutes or so. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get into things. Firstly, just to remind everyone on the call that we are recording this session. So if you don't want your face to appear or you're not supposed to be here for whatever reason, just turn the camera off using the little icon on the top there, and you'll be displayed without your image appearing. This will be uploaded to our YouTube channel later today or tomorrow. So just to make you aware that recording is in progress. I'm sure you all know the drill by now in terms of these online meetings, but please mute your microphone when you're not talking, just to avoid any background noise. We're going to operate slightly differently this morning. Normally we ask for questions to be taken at the end of the session, but if you want to leave any questions that you've got in the chat, we'll try and deal with those as we go along sort of throughout the course of the presentation. So rather than just sort of unmuting your microphone and speaking, if you put your question as it comes to you in the chat, I think that's probably a better way of doing it, and we'll pick those questions up as we go along. One thing I forget to do every single time is introduce myself at the start of it, and I've done it again. So my name is Matt Callaghan. I'm the Economic Development Officer for Swansea Council. And along with my colleague Steve, we work on the business engagement, business support side of things under the Business Swansea branding. And this is just one of a number of things, initiatives that we run. Other initiatives include our business e-newsletter that goes out once every couple of weeks. And we've also got a range of business support mechanisms, including business support grants. So I'll send you details of those afterwards via email in the summary email to bring all this together. So what we're going to do is say there's not many of us here, but we will go around the room and introduce ourselves and then hand across to our friends and colleagues at Natwest who will run through the presentation, and then we can have a sort of discussion at the end of that if there's anything that comes out of that of note. So hand across this, I mentioned Steve earlier, hand across to Steve just to introduce himself now.
Morning everyone, my name's Steve Williams. As Matt said, I'm his counterpart in the economic development team. Very good to be here. Meet obviously I know one or two of you. Nice to see new members joining here today, and looking very forward to the presentation.
Great, thanks Steve. And then Hal.
Good morning everyone, I'm Howell Bassett. I'm a business advisor with Business Wales. I don't know if you've all heard of Business Wales, but we offer help and support to start-up and established businesses on all sort of aspects of business, really, from start-up to established, like I said. So, you know, you can contact Business Wales anytime through our helpline. It's advertised widely on the Business Wales website and on social media channels.
Thanks, Hal. I was saying to Julie just before the call, I've come from outside the local area, and just having that fact that Business Wales is here and exists is something that businesses should appreciate how fortunate they are to have here, and should take advantage of it, because there's other parts of the UK where that service simply isn't there. So from an outsider's perspective coming in, I can sort of vouch for how valuable that service is. So if you know that it's there, please do use it. Catherine, just tell us a little bit about your business and what brings you here today.
Is that me? Hello?
Hi, Catherine, can you hear us?
Oh, sorry. Hi. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead.
Hi. Yes, sorry. My name's Catherine. I'm the marketing executive for Plantasia in Swansea, a family attraction. I also do marketing for Parkwood Outdoors Dollar Guide, which is an activity centre near Merthyr and the Brecon Beacons.
So who's your typical customer base, if you've got one at all, would you say?
Yeah, for Plantasia, we have, I guess it's mainly mums with young children. The location is ideally suited for, you know, young children with the animals. It is a tropical zoo. We've got lots of interactive attractions that they can get involved with here. And yeah, it's just a wonderful family place to come. So we do get other types of customers too, but our main customer are mums with or families with children.
So you're extra busy this week, no doubt, is that right?
We are, yes. Yeah, it's very, very noisy here today.
Good, that's a good thing. Noisy is good. Good, thanks very much. I've done the mute thing. Okay, thanks very much. I'll hand it across now to Julia and Blessing, who can introduce themselves, but also go through the presentation and say we'll deal with questions as and when they come along.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. Good morning, everyone. My name's Julia Perry. I'm the local enterprise manager for Natwest Bank. A key part of my role is to bring you relevant and useful content to support you and your business on whatever journey you're on, startup or growth or wherever you are in your business. So at NatWest, supporting enterprise is a core objective of ours. We've developed an online program called Business Builder, which is free for anyone to access and has a wealth of relevant topics around business and business growth and support. And I say it's free to anyone to register. It doesn't matter whether you bank with NatWest or not, or wherever you are in your journey. Quick 20-minute sessions that you can do on video or reading, or there are actual live events, which is where this session has been pulled from today. So Blessing's going to deliver you the live event that we deliver to our entrepreneurs in our accelerator hub in Cardiff, which is Blessing's job. I won't steal her thunder. I'm going to hand you over to Blessing. She can tell you a little bit more about her.
Thank you, Julia. So yeah, as Julia mentioned, my name is Blessing and I'm one of the acceleration managers on the NatWest Accelerator program. So my job really is to work with entrepreneurs on a day-to-day basis, having face-to-face interactions with them, looking at things like the challenges that they're facing within their businesses on the more practical side. So, you know, obviously understanding your customers, a topic that comes up a lot, but we also look at each entrepreneur's personal development journey as well. So there's no kind of one size fits all solution that we provide for everyone. Some people might want to know more about, you know, being a better leader. Some people might want to know about, you know, being a better team player or just managing their time more effectively. So that's where we come in and make sure that it's beneficial to each individual rather than, it's beneficial to each individual so that we do a bespoke solution for everyone. So that's my role. So without further ado, I think we can probably go into our presentation. Is that right? Or okay, perfect. I'm just going to ask Julia to share the slides as we go along. So Julia's kindly agreed to help me from her end. So I'm sure you'll be well and truly sick of me hearing me say, next slide, please, Julia. But it's all part of, you know, our usual tech struggles, as I'm sure everyone is familiar with. So yeah, as I said, today's session is on understanding your customer, and we're going to be talking about the different aspects that go into that as a topic. Can I have the next slide, please, Julia? So thinking about customer discovery itself, then I want to just pose a question to the audience as a bit of a reflective exercise. Throughout this session, I'd like you to think about, you know, whether or not you've come across customer discovery before, what we mean by this, and also just applying it to the interpretations that we're going to go through in today's session. Next slide, please, Julia. So customer discovery all comes back to testing every guess or assumption that you have about your business model in order to make decisions based on facts and not assumptions. Customer discovery and customer validation are essential to validating learning within your business. Next slide, please, Julia. So when we're talking about customer discovery and customer validation, the easy bit here is the idea. More often than not, we as entrepreneurs tend to focus on the solution first, and we don't give any thought to who the end user or customer is or why they'd want to use the solution. Can I have the next animation, please, Julia, on the same slide? Perfect, thank you. So there's a term that we often refer to, and it's called falling in love with the problem. So this is where we identified a need that a customer has, and we build a solution to address that specific problem or need. Doing this enables you to focus on a group of customers who have had that problem or need. It helps you to identify and understand those customers, and also understand the true value, or what we call pain relievers or gain creators, that you're delivering to those specific customers. So again, another question I'd like us to all think about as we go through the next few slides is thinking about whether or not you do this already, and if you have an example of another company that you've seen doing this well, so that you can take some lessons and develop it into a solution for your own company. Can I have the next slide, please, Julia? So like we said in the previous slide, fall in love with the problem rather than the solution. So when we think about this phrase, make sure that, we're not falling in love with the solution that we came up with as entrepreneurs, because that idea may become, your baby as an entrepreneur. If you have started the idea from inception all the way into startup, it can be really hard to take on any feedback, or it can be really hard to move with the times, especially with a lot of businesses that have had to pivot during COVID, for example, and adapt from a face-to-face solution into a more online offering. So it can sometimes feel a bit counterintuitive or unnatural for us as entrepreneurs to, change our approach and start falling in love with the problem rather than the solution. But in the long run, it will actually benefit us as entrepreneurs, so that we make sure we're continuing to deliver value and gain creators to our customers that we want to serve. Next slide, please, Julia. So then, this then begs the question why customer discovery is important. When we're thinking about starting a business, obviously we want to generate revenue, and that means we need to have a significant customer base. So focusing on customer discovery and customer validation can ensure that we do actually make money from the solution that we want to develop for our customers. Next slide, please, Julia. So we did a bit of research into this, and we asked some companies about, a few different questions about, why their businesses have failed, or why they think their businesses have failed. So the top reason for businesses failing within the first few years of trading is due to a lack of fully validating the market need. So as you can see, over 42% of businesses didn't really fully understand the product market fit. So when we talk about the product market fit, that's talking about whether or not the market they've rolled out their product into is actually the correct one, and whether or not there actually is a market or a need for that product or service. And then when you look at the statistics as well, you'll notice that 14% of businesses fail due to ignoring or not listening to their customers. So they've actually started out with a very good understanding of their customers, but their needs may be changing, or they might not have the full picture of what their customers want. So they then don't listen to that feedback, and unfortunately those businesses did then go under. So you can see here about how customer validation and knowing your customer really well can actually be really important for the business. Next slide, please, Julia. So obviously when we talk about a startup, we talk about making money, but we also think about how the fundamental activity of a startup is to turn ideas into products. Then we need to measure how customers respond and learn whether to pivot or persevere. All successful startup processes should be geared to accelerate that feedback loop. So we're thinking about building, measuring, and learning from all of the feedback that we receive, but also starting out with, again, a pretty good understanding of what our customers want. So to further demonstrate this, I'm just going to ask a few questions, again, in a reflective exercise for the audience to think about, companies or their own company, and to just really reflect on how well we are implementing customer feedback and customer wants into our everyday operations. So thinking about your customer segments then, is there anything that you can tell us specifically about your customer segments? So whether that's demographics or psychographics of your audience, thinking about the location of them, thinking about things like their behaviors as well. Is there anything that you can really pinpoint and say, I know my customer segments really well, and these are the characteristics that make up that customer segment? And like I said, obviously thinking about their motivations for buying, so in relation to their behaviors as well. So is it purely business? Is it more emotional? Are your customers invested in your brand? Are they looking at how you treat your employees? Are they looking at how environmentally friendly your company is? So thinking about that as well is really important to get to know your customer really well and make sure that you're still appealing to the customers and their needs. And then again, further building on their behaviors, thinking about their buying patterns. So when do they buy? Do they buy something only when they need it? Do they buy something because they'd like to stock up on a certain product, within their home? Do they buy something or consume something, in terms of leisure activities when there is a trigger event in, their family, whether it's a special occasion like a birthday or anniversary, or do they do that on a weekly basis? And how do they buy? Do your customers want to be reached via online channels? Do they want to be reached, via, say, for example, WhatsApp? A lot of customer service teams are now utilizing WhatsApp. Is there an online chat function? Do they actually just want to talk to a real human? So do they want to be able to call you up? Or do they want to be able to, walk into your offices and have a conversation with you? So thinking about their buying patterns, their behaviors related to those buying patterns, and how they buy as well can be really useful to really pinpoint your customers. And then thinking about how they reach their customers. So, thinking about from brand awareness all through to aftercare. So brand awareness is describing, when you're not necessarily selling to a customer or a potential customer, but you're just making them aware of your brand, all the way through to when they decide to consume your product or service, and then the aftercare after they've consumed your product or service. So, do your customers like to give you feedback after they have bought a certain product or service? With brand awareness, how can you reach them? Is it through social media? Within social media, is it through LinkedIn, where the audience is very different to the audience on Instagram, for example? Again, is it through face-to-face interactions, human interactions? How do those customers want to be reached at each specific stage of them interacting with your brand? And then think about the level of service that your customers need. Do they want someone to call them, say, every 2 days to check in on them, to see if they're still looking forward to coming to your visitor center, or to check if they are enjoying the product that they bought from your website? Or do they just want to be, left to it and just figure out everything for themselves and only need to call you up, when they have a problem? So what level of the service, do your customers need? And also that's going to be a very good indication of the type of brand as well that you have. So, when you think about luxury brands, for example, the level of customer service there needed is very different to, fast fashion, where, you buy something off, a website and you just buy an outfit that you want to wear once and, forget about it. So also take into consideration the different levels of service needed by your customers, and also what you want to provide for them to be able to interact with your brand better. So thinking about all of these questions can really bundle up and summarize very well how your business has benefited from knowing this information about your customers. And again, if there are any questions in there that you didn't necessarily have the answer to, it's a very good starting point for you to start asking yourself these questions and answering them, so that you can make sure that you can maintain that product market fit like we spoke about earlier in the presentation. Next slide, please, Julia. A good place to start when understanding who your customers are is looking at what their motivations for buying are, and if your product or service is continuing to meet those needs. Anyone who's read The Lean Startup will have come across the term, but effectively a pivot is a change in strategy without a change in vision. So the same way that if you run into traffic on the motorway, you don't change your destination and you don't attempt to ram the car in front of you, hopefully. But what you do is you fire up Google Maps and you look for an alternative route. So the exact same principle can be applied to business and pivoting. Pivoting is an important part of your business journey, and whilst it can feel uncomfortable or even counterproductive to think about doing things differently, it can often make the difference between scaling up or winding down. Thinking back to those statistics we looked at before about how, a lot of businesses failed because they did have a good understanding of their initial customer, but failed to listen to feedback. So again, this is further corroborating that point. So quite often, the businesses that we know of today exist due to several pivots. For example, YouTube started out as a dating site, but now it's a video sharing platform. Or Twitter was originally called Audio, which was a podcasting service. So again, they listened to their customers, they responded to their customers' needs, and decided to change their product offering based on the market and its demands. So what happens when businesses fail to pivot? Well, we get companies like Blockbuster, which aren't around anymore. Knowing when to pivot is important. It's just as important as the information you regularly track and measure in order to make those decisions. And so for this reason, we use a really simple but crucial technique. I've described this in a bit of detail right now, but now we have a nice summary of how we can actually use the information and the feedback loop that we mentioned before. Can I have the next slide, please, Julia? So this is a very simplified illustration of build, measure, and learn. And it's a cyclical process of development which enables entrepreneurs to develop their business quickly. In the build stage, you build experiments within your business based on your assumptions that you need to test within your business. This could be anything from product market fit to reducing costs within a business, and should be adopted whether you're in the early stages of validating an idea, or you've been trading for over 10 years and you're looking to scale your business, or even diversify into new industries. In the measure phase, this is where you develop the principles of putting measures into place to help you understand the results of that experiment, whether that's customer feedback, return on investment, pay-per-click, or conversion rates. And then in the final stage, this is where you learn. So this stage is undoubtedly the most important and is focused on determining the results from the measure phase so you can use them to inform the direction of travel. At this point, you stop to consider if you continue with the original plan, iterate and tweak the plan, or completely change direction. So again, coming back to what we mentioned before about pivoting, where you change your strategy, but you don't necessarily change your end goal or your destination. Using this method of building mini experiments to test the assumptions that you're making about different aspects of your business will enable you to be more focused, efficient, and lean within the resources that you have, the time and money that you have at your disposal as well. And as we know, as SMEs or startups, time and money can be really important resources, and they can very often be the make or break of that business and its survival. It may be that you've already adopted lean principles into your business, either consciously or unconsciously. But by recognizing these principles and cementing them within your operational rhythm, future planning and team training, you're helping your business stay relevant within your customer base and the customers that you'd like to serve. Can I have the next slide, please, Julia? So obviously we've spoken about, the very practical processes that we can go through in terms of identifying our customers, validating the information that we have, and also catering to their needs. But we also, sometimes a big blocker for a lot of people is to actually put that into practice in a way that makes sense to us and helps us to really answer those questions as well, that I spoke about before about customer behaviors and also how we can better serve them. So a great tool that you can use if you don't already use them is what we call customer personas. Can I have the next slide, please, Julia? So a customer persona is a semi-fictional representation of your ideal customer based on market research and real data about your existing customer. So I think Catherine mentioned before about, young families or mothers, coming to the visitor center, for example. That's a really good starting point of building your customer persona, and now thinking about all of the other questions that we mentioned earlier as well. So you can use that as a starting point for this exercise. So customer personas are a great way to build a picture of who your typical customers are, so you can consider them when you're making decisions within your business. When creating your customer personas, consider including customer demographics, behavior patterns, motivations, and goals to give you insight into what your customer is, and why they buy from you. So to really put this into context, can I have the next slide, please, Julia? So as an example here, we've got a picture, of a young lady. She's got her glasses on, her hair is nice and down, and she's got, a nice blouse on as well. So again, that can already tell you a lot about, this particular customer and her potential behaviors. So, thinking about the fact that maybe she's not necessarily very, into the high end of luxury beauty products, for example. She wants something more practical. She wants something that is just going to do the job for her. Or you could also say, she's a very sociable character because, there's someone else in the background there. Or you can think about, okay, the color of her blouse, for example, is a white blouse. So maybe we could say, her habits are, she doesn't necessarily have a young family who, when you think about having children, you might, think about whether or not your clothes will get messy. So thinking about all of those different aspects and characteristics, of the different customer personas that you want to build. Similarly, if we had a picture of, say an older lady on there who had her hair slicked back in a bun, for example, and, she had a suit on, we could say, okay, so maybe this lady's buying patterns are different because, her life habits as well are different, or maybe her family might be older, so she might not need to necessarily think about buying clothes that are more practical as opposed to luxury because her family's now older, moved on, and maybe they might have moved out. So that's how you can really use customer personas to really put into practice all the things that we spoke about before, about how you can really visualize who your potential customers might be. So as a starting point, ask yourself the key questions. Sorry, I'm just going to check if they're coming up on the screen. Oops. Okay, can I have the next few points on the same slide, please, Julia? Thank you very much. If we can just have all of them on the screen at the same time, and then thank you. Perfect, thank you so much. So as a starting point, you can ask yourself all of these key questions about each of your customer segments to understand more about their key behaviors and their motivations. So like I said before, thinking about how customers in different life stages will behave differently based on their buying patterns. And also, when we think about, female customers as opposed to male customers, again, their preferences might be different there. So really thinking about those characteristics that go into a buying decision, how much disposable income someone has, or when you think about the desire that someone wants for a product, they might have the desire, but not necessarily the money. So then do you need to think about, constantly creating a loop of brand awareness so that when they do get around to having the money to buy something from you, then you'll, be the first person or first provider, that they would go through. So if you don't already have customer personas, the information that you can get from answering these questions, you can almost build on it further. So once you have your initial customer persona, that's not to say that always has to stay the same. That can change at any given point based on customer feedback, based on also trends that you are noticing or identifying within your customer buying patterns, which don't necessarily come through customer feedback, and also based on the environment around you as well. So, even little things like Brexit, for example, that's had a knock-on effect on online shopping habits, because now a customer has to think about, buying a product online, but then also has to consider extra custom duties or, anything as well to do with that. So really think about your customers, both from an internal perspective, things that you're seeing, but also from the environment around you as well. Can I have the next slide, please, Julia? Perfect, thank you so much. Okay, and again, can I just have all of the 7 points on the screen here? Thank you so much. So what do your customer personas help you to do with your business? Obviously, we've spoken quite a lot about, obviously the potential questions that you can ask yourself, the potential characteristics that you can take into consideration. But now we're just going to summarize all of that into some key bullet points that you can really take away and reflect on after this session. So personas can help you to design for behaviors and not for demographics. So like I mentioned before, things like, are you treating your customers fairly? Things like how environmentally friendly are all of your processes? Those are things that come into customers' buying behaviors, and that's not necessarily to do with their demographics, with the more traditional things that we would look at in terms of their age, their location, their education level, looking at things like those. So think about designing for your customers' behaviors, but not necessarily their demographics purely. Of course, that does, come into consideration as well, but we just need to look at both of those aspects in equal balance. So customer personas can also help you to create a lens through which you can view your products or services from the perspective of real people. So again, thinking about, when we're looking at the slide where there was a picture, of a lady there, that really helps you to put yourself in, their shoes and really look at your offering, your product or service offering from the customer's perspective. Thinking about it from a real people perspective can really help us not fall into the trap of almost making those assumptions, like we said before. Asking ourselves questions based on a visual representation of those customers can be a very useful tool in order for us to have a very good understanding of the customers. It can also help us to build empathy as well from a customer perspective. So again, just having a picture of someone can just, help us to personify all of the assumptions and the numbers or statistics that we may be looking at, because at the end of the day, we are selling to people and not just numbers. And a lot of the time, we can tend to forget that within entrepreneurialism when we're thinking about, the market and also the market research as a whole, because it's very often, presented in numbers. Then think about, how a customer persona can help you to focus on where the customers spend their time. So again, thinking about, do they spend their time online? Do they spend their time actually in physical shops? Do they spend their time with their family, with their friends? So would they, want to know about a certain product or service through word of mouth from someone they trust? Thinking about where the customer spends their time can really help us to bring that customer persona to life, and also it helps us to then identify our customers within our business. So the personas as well can help us to speak the customer's language. And again, this is really important when we're thinking about marketing to our specific customers, because we want to make sure that we're speaking to the customers about the messages that matter to them the most. Thinking about, for example, when you're trying to sell a mattress to someone, you don't start telling them about, how many springs the mattress has, what the filling was used. You talk to them about, do you want a good night's sleep? When you are sleeping at night, what are your problems? Thinking about speaking the customer's language there and making sure that you are appealing to what they want to hear, rather than just, presenting them with a mass media message, can be a really useful tool, something, again, that we can use through customer personas. And then, of course, customer personas can help us to create persona-specific content and messaging. So very much in line with what I just spoke about speaking the customer's language. You also want to take into consideration the media that they consume. Do your customers respond better to videos? Do they respond better to blog posts? Do they respond better to radio adverts? What is it? What type of content and messaging really hits the spot with your customers for them to be motivated to actually buy your product or service? Can we have the next slide, please, Julia? And can I have all of the points on the screen again as well for this one? Thank you so much. So kind of summarizing everything that we've spoken about then, we're now coming to the end of the presentation. There are some common traps or pitfalls that we can fall into, as entrepreneurs or as marketing, specialists, or, just business leaders as well. And it's very important for us to be conscious of these, or, to be very aware of them, so that we don't fall into these traps within our business operations. So first and foremost, don't assume that everyone wants to buy your product or service. It's actually okay to not be everything for everyone. I think that's why companies do thrive, because they find out who their customers are and actually appeal to those customers and do what they have said they're going to do really well for that specific customer base. If you do everything at 30% quality rate for everyone, it's very different to doing something really well for a select group of people at 100% quality rate. So don't be afraid of really honing in on your customer persona and really identifying who those customers are, because you actually don't want to be everything for everyone. Don't assume that all of your customers think and act the same. Just because you have feedback from 10 customers, that doesn't mean that they all act the same. Try to distinguish between customer types using personas. So a very good example that I always like to use is when you think about a coffee shop, for example. When you go into Starbucks, there's a menu. Obviously, the common characteristic of everyone going into Starbucks is that they like coffee. But some people like their coffee with milk, some people like it without sugar, some people like it with vanilla syrup. Thinking about the fact that, yes, there is a certain level of assumption that you need to make within your customers. And yes, there is a certain level of reliance that you need to put on your customers' feedback. But also think about the fact that not all of them will act the same way. Not everyone will want a sweet coffee. Not everyone will want, a latte. Thinking about how you can actually identify those trends alongside the feedback. And then obviously thinking about how don't assume that your customers' behaviors and opinions won't change as well. Just because you have that initial customer persona, that doesn't mean that that's always going to stay the same. So always thinking about building, measuring and learning, that cyclical process that we spoke about before. Thinking about also trying not to listen to kind of feedback or any comments or I guess conversation that you have with people who might not necessarily give you honest feedback as well. So we all know, our families are our biggest fans, and I know for a fact if I ask my mum about whether or not I've done something well, she'll always say, oh yeah, that's really great. So just always thinking about making sure that you're asking the right people the right questions, because you want to maintain a balanced level of feedback there. And finally, qualify every decision that you make within your business through customer validations. So just because you can do something, that doesn't mean you should do something. So say for example, with coming back to the example we used about Starbucks, just because Starbucks could potentially start selling on with street vans or those little street food vans, that doesn't mean they should, because obviously the whole experience of Starbucks is for their customers to be able to actually go in, sit inside and be in a space that creates a great atmosphere. So always thinking about if there is a possibility of you doing something, make sure you validate it with your customers first and really think about as to whether or not that's actually going to bring value for the customers that you want to appeal to. Can I have the next slide, please, Julia? So I have a reflective exercise for everyone to take away. Feel free to take a picture of this slide or just jot down the points that we're going to go through. Taking into consideration everything that we've spoken about today, think about what you still need to validate within your business, or any questions that we ask to ourselves that you don't have the answer to. So thinking about that, and also thinking about what you need to explore further within your customer segments. Then take a moment to think about which metrics you need to measure in order to gain the information that you want. So are you measuring how many people buy a specific product? Are you measuring how many people walk through the door on a Monday as opposed to a Thursday? Are you thinking about measuring the number of people who have clicked on a certain advert that you've put on Instagram versus Facebook? So think about the metrics that you need to measure and what information you need to get from those metrics. And then obviously that can inform, coming back to what we said before about identifying what you still need to validate and explore further. And then the last part of the exercise is to think about how you're going to validate these aspects. So you have all of the information to hand, you've collected all of this information. So are you now going to speak to your customers just as and when you happen to come across them? Are you going to actively send out surveys? Are you going to invite feedback, whilst they're at your attraction or, whilst they are shopping on your website? what are you actually going to, validate, and how are you going to validate, the aspects that you want to collect information on. And then once you have all of that information, then really think to yourself what you're going to do as a result of this workshop. So what we always say, at the accelerator is once we have, identified a problem, or once we've identified the reality of our situation, then we identify how we're actually going to get to that endpoint. What do we need to do, or what do we need to put into place on a personal level, but also within our businesses, to make sure that we are getting to that desired end goal that we need to get to. So that brings me to the end of the bulk of today's session. I'm just going to hand over to Julia to talk about our last slide now.
Thanks, Blessing. So, like feedback matters to you in your business, it matters to us in these presentations as well. It's really helpful for us to understand what you've got from this session, if it has been useful for you or not, as the case may be. Honest feedback is vitally important to how we put these sessions together. It's a very, very quick survey. It's about 2 or 3 questions. If you can click on the drop down box and choose myself, Julia Perry, as your host. And the session that we've run through today is one of our business builder sessions. Again, that's in the drop down box. Business builder is about the 4th or 5th one down. And as I say, a couple of very quick questions on an NPS score. So what we mean by the NPS score, it's Net Promoter Score. So what we're really wanting to know is if you found this session really useful today and you would recommend other people to come and attend, we'd ask you to score us a 9 or a 10. If you did find bits of it useful and that it was good, but maybe not great, we'd ask you to score us a 7 or an 8. If it wasn't useful for you at all, and if that's the case, please do be honest, it would be a 6 or below. So that's how that scoring system works, and we would be really, really grateful if you could take a couple of minutes just to complete some feedback for us. And that was kind of all I needed to say, and hand you back to Blessing just to wrap up.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Julia. So yeah, like Julia said, we'd really love your feedback on today's session, and I do hope that you found it useful. So I guess we probably haven't had any questions come through on chat. But I suppose, do we have time to open the floor for questions now, or?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we'll do that. I mean, thank you for that. First of all, that was really useful, and even as local government officer as I am, it's given me lots of things to think about in terms of the way that we deal with our businesses and our audience. So there's lots of stuff in there. If you've got a question, just sort of now we're out of the formal session, just stick the little hand up. There's a little man on the top bar with his hand raised. Just stick your hand up. I've got a couple of questions really just coming from that. I remember there is a point to this, and I'll get to it in a minute. I remember judging a business award a long time ago, and I was dealing with a chap who was running a restaurant with sort of like a restaurant hotel type of business, and he said to me, and it always stuck with me, the customer isn't always right, but the customer should always be listened to. And we have this idea, don't we? We're told that the customer is always right, but actually he sort of took a slightly different sort of steer on that, and it sort of struck a chord with me. And I thought actually that there's something in that, certainly. And then it sort of got me to thinking around. I mean, you spoke around, didn't you, a lot around sort of customer habits and that sort of thing, and that balance between the customers driving change in your business and the business itself driving the change in customers. And I think there's probably an instance for both. And I was trying to think of a couple of examples. There was one, I think, a number of years ago now, where Dairy Milk changed the shape of their chocolate bar from chunky bar to rounded, and the customers lost their mind about it because they swore that it changed the flavour of the bar. And I think Morrison's changed their customer loyalty, but clearly sort of Cadbury's and Morrison's have done that with a view to, in their mind, thinking this is the right way to steer customers. So there is a point to the question. Where do you sort of see that balance sitting between, there's undoubtedly need at certain points, isn't there, for the business to be the driver of that change and then acting in a way that they think is best for their customers. But clearly that's not right all of the time. So sort of how do you see that balance sitting where a business identifies the need to bring in change that their customers maybe don't like initially, but for the longer benefits see it as the right thing to be doing?
I think it comes back to what I mentioned before about really paying attention to the trends as well that you're identifying from your customers' buying habits. So, you know, yeah, like you said, sometimes people don't actually know that they need something until you present it to them, and then they think, oh, actually, it's really useful. So, you know, it's all. Sorry.
I've got a fantastic example of that I heard a little while ago along a similar vein. And it's something that I think we can all relate to. Well, those of us of a certain age can definitely relate to. iPhones, everybody knows about iPhones. But if you go back to when they first launched, what were we all using? We were all using Nokias, and they were really small. And then they were flip phones, and they were really trendy, and they were in silver, and they were all different type of designs. An iPhone launched a massive phone with a huge screen, and there was an interview I saw with the guy from Nokia, and he basically was laughing at Apple, going, I don't know what they're on about. People want smaller phones. They want them to be thinner and lighter, and they don't need these big screens. That's all people do on them is text and make calls. You know, I'm not worried about it at all. Forward 5 years, everybody wants the newest iPhone with the biggest screen and the most. So I think that, like Blessing was saying, is an example of looking at the trends and going, well, this isn't what people are telling us they want, but looking at where it's going, that is going to be what they want. And that was probably one of the best interviews I've ever seen, actually, as an example of this, of being so in your groove that you're not looking at the bigger picture.
Yeah. That's not what I thought you were going to say, actually, Julie. I thought you were going to complain about when iPhone removed the headphone jack from their product and told everyone it was the right thing to be doing. I remember being furious about that at the time, but now look, you just
well, there's another one.
Yeah. So I think the other thing that sort of struck me was the thing around features and benefits. I think you used the example, Blessing, of the mattress. I think a lot of us get stuck into what we perceive to be the features of the thing, and not actually the benefit to the customer. And I think, you know, that's a point that I bang on quite regularly, is the thing about features and benefits.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, you know, when we are even looking at developing a business model canvas, which we use a lot as well at the accelerator, we do kind of fall into that trap of, you know, describing the features, and then entrepreneurs are surprised and they're like, but why is no one buying my product? I've told them about everything that it can do. And then you almost need to take a step back and think, well, we're selling to people at the end of the day. You know, people have emotions, people have their buying habits, people have, you know, other feedback as well from other customers that comes into play when we're talking about, you know, our buying habits and whether or not we actually want to take a product on. So yeah, I think that's a really good point as well, just knowing the difference between features and benefits, and knowing the specific audience that is interested in the features as opposed to the audience which is then interested in the benefits as well. And I think part of it is just convincing, you know, the target customer that you are the best person to provide them, you know, with that benefit. You are the best person who knows a lot about, you know, the features of this specific product or service in order for you to provide that benefit as well. Because I'm sure, you know, when we look at things like, say, for example, people doing their nails, or that's just something that I know for a fact that I know so many of my friends would be like, no, I'd rather just do them myself. But actually, when you go and, you know, to the nail salon and they say, oh, we use this machine, or we do this, or we do that, then they think, oh, actually, no, let me, you know, get my nails done by someone else. So it is actually about convincing, you know, people to make sure that they know that you are, you know, the best at what you do. And that was coming back to what I was saying before about it's okay not to be everything for everyone, because you need to make sure that, you know, the benefits that you're providing are the best they can be based on, you know, your specific customer segment.
Great. There's a question just appeared in the chat. Can you see that? Or
yeah, I can. I'll just open it up now. Okay, so the best way to, I'll just read the question out. So the question is, what's the best way to gather the data? Do we need to employ a research company, or is in-house data just as effective? I think it's all about the quality of the questions that you're asking. The method of how you get that information or data is probably not as important, because, you know, some people do employ outsourced market research agencies, or some people do the market research themselves. But what it comes down to is actually asking the right questions of your customers. So, you know, if you're trying to find out why they like your product or service, for example, thinking about asking them, you know, what their favorite thing is, what drew them to, you know, your specific product or service, so that you make sure that the output from what you're collecting is very relevant and specific to the information that you don't have. So obviously, when we're talking about the exercise that I set for everyone at the end of today's session, was thinking about, you know, what don't you have the answers to? How do you actually, what do you actually need to do to get those answers, and what are you going to do to use that information for, is a very good starting point. But, you know, it's different for everyone. I think with market research, obviously, if you want to talk to anyone who's a potential customer, for example, then you can speak to a market research agency, because then they'll have a specific demographic, you know, or cross section of your specific target audience that they can have access to. However, if you want to speak to your existing customers, then obviously doing it yourself would be better, because, you know, those existing customers would respond better to giving you feedback within your company. So I think, yeah, like I said, the most important thing is actually focusing on asking the right questions, focusing on making sure you're collecting the right sort of information. But obviously, the method in which you do it can be very dependent on what exactly you want to achieve from that exercise as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Magic, thank you. Obviously, the last, say, 18 months, is a bit more than that now, has forced businesses to pivot like never before. And certainly, I think customer habits have changed during that time. What's your experience of businesses coming to you in terms of how they dealt with that, or not, in the case may be? Because one of the things that strikes me is that the answer is a business plan. And if your business plan is robust and you've done your SWOT analysis, that helps you to prepare for that. But I'm guessing a lot of businesses weren't in that position where they had that. So what's been your experience of businesses coming to you with issues around that?
So I'll start with businesses that have thrived, you know, over the last 18 months or so. So those are the businesses where they have they've identified their own behaviors, and they've actually just rolled that out as a test to the market, and then you know, just kind of adapted it to you know, how things are working now. So for example, when we think about caterers, you know, so they started out as a catering company, then moved on to having a takeout outlet, and then obviously that you know, wasn't really an option for a long time. So they then started doing frozen takeaway meals that supermarkets can sell. So it's almost just adapting the same thing that they're doing, but for the different channels, you know, in which their customers could reach them. So I think those are the examples of, you know, what I was saying before about not necessarily falling in love with the solution, but falling in love with the problem, because the problem is people wanted, you know, food that was a bit different in their homes throughout lockdown. And what the takeaway company did then obviously just moved on to, you know, providing frozen meals. So they're still doing the same thing, but just getting it to their customers in different ways. So I think a lot of the businesses that we see have kind of started off from an idea where one person thinks, well, if I want this, then some other people might want this as well. Tested it in the market and then rolled it out, you know, on a gradual basis, and almost just kind of moved in response to the changes and challenges that they faced along the way. In terms of, you know, the flip side of things, I think, yeah, definitely there are some businesses that had planned expansion based on, you know, everything being open, lockdown not being there, and then obviously, you know, lockdown did happen, and that actually just ended up with them running out of money to sustain the options that they were going to pursue in the event of lockdown not happening. So yeah, business planning can definitely come into it, but also sometimes, you know, it can kind of be the make or break when you have, you know, a rigid strategic plan in place, and then everything around you changes, but you don't have the necessary resources to also change in response to that. So I think that's a big thing that I've seen as well. But also, you know, coming back to what I was saying before about actually, well, some people just really don't want to let go of that initial idea that they had. They might actually have the resources, or they might actually have the ability to pivot, but actually because they've fallen in love, you know, with that idea so much, it then becomes difficult to have that conversation of, okay, so, you know, the world around us has changed. How do we then, you know, update your internal processes? How do we update your product offering to respond to that? And some people just don't really want to, you know, hear about it, which isn't necessarily to say that they're doing it intentionally, but I think it's a trap that, you know, a lot of entrepreneurs fall into, where they fall in love with their solution so much that there's just kind of no space for I guess, what's the word I'm looking for pivoting, I suppose. So yeah.
Super. We're coming up to the hour. Any more before I do the final announcements and wrap the session up?
No, I'd just like to thank Blessing and Julia for the presentation. I think you made some excellent points there on how important it is to know your customers. And this is something that we emphasize right in our Starting Your Business webinars always, because unless they know what sort of customer, who their customer is and who they're dealing with, how can they possibly be selling their products and services to them, really, isn't it? So thank you again.
Yeah, super. Good. Just four things from me, actually. The first of which is to thank you both for the presentation today. Like Howell said, really insightful, really helpful. Thank you for that. Something for future viewers of this on YouTube, and we get really good viewing figures on our YouTube channel. If you're watching this in the future on YouTube, I would encourage you to come along to the live session in future, because I think you'll get far more out of the session being able to interact and engage with it and ask the question at the session. So just for an hour of your time, so when you are watching this on YouTube, I would encourage you to do it. And we'd like to convert some of our really good viewing figures on YouTube into the live sessions. That would be really good if you're watching it in future. We've got 2 events in November. On the 11th of November, we've got our Startup Enterprise Club, which is focusing on websites. So if you're a new business looking to launch a website for the first time, please come along to that. But even if you're not a new business, I think there's something really valuable in that for you, in terms of either if you're not happy with your existing website, or you want to improve what you've got, or you're an existing business that doesn't have a website. So I would encourage you to come along to that on the 11th of November. And 25th of November, we've got a session under the Power Hour for Google My Business. So, you know, when you type into Google, I need a plumber in Mumbles, and you get the little box on the right hand side, that is Google My Business. So you need to make sure that under Google My Business, you have claimed the listing that's available to you, because it's a really important tool to drive traffic and customers into your business, to make sure that they know that you're there. So Google My Business is really powerful. And then the final thing is just to make you aware, I mentioned it a couple of times, is the library of videos on our YouTube channel that's ever growing. Every time we have these sessions, that they are recorded and made available. So if you've missed anything in the past, please do go back and watch that, because we're building up a really valuable site from the sessions that we've run previously. So that's all from me now. Thank you all for coming. Thank you again for the presentation, and we'll see you in the next session under the Business Swansea brand. Thank you very much.